Hey you, with the 5th Gen 4Runner. Have you been searching the internet trying to figure out if you can add an aftermarket amplifier yourself in your own garage? I've got good news. You found the perfect channel. We're gonna be diving into this step by step today. I've just installed a 12W7 that you can see in front of you now, using the stock head unit and a JL750 aftermarket amp that I have under the passenger seat. There's a few tools that you'll need. A lot of you guys are gonna have this. There's some equipment that I recommend. This job can be done many ways, but ultimately what I'm gonna give you today is a step-by-step that's gonna allow you to complete the job and have a super clean install that no one will ever know is there. Welcome to BT Willis Garage. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. So I have the equipment that I'm gonna end up installing laid out in front of us here. The 12W7 and the Pro Slant box. We've got a 750 HD amp over to the right that's not in view right now that you will see momentarily. We've got 16 gauge colored wire in multiple colors so that we can make sure we keep up with what's what as far as left speaker, right speaker, etc. We've got an LC2I Pro that is so important for this job that will avoid any bass rollover that occurs whenever you turn the volume up in your 4Runner. The car tries to protect itself, so it artificially lowers the bass. We're gonna get rid of that. A 4-gauge wiring kit is needed for my amp. Buy the proper wiring kit for yours, and of course have a fuse block on it to protect your car from fires. And then of course, here in a moment, we're gonna go in my garage and take another look at those tools that were laid out. What I'm gonna do, guys, is put everything that I used in the description of this video. If you have it, great. If you don't, you may consider buying it off Amazon using my link that supports the channel. Thanks a lot. And if you decide you can go without it, such as the, maybe you wanna screw into your carpet instead of use Velcro like I did, that's fine too. But here's everything that I ended up using. There's very few things that are not pictured. So we are gonna get started by taking a look at how to remove the factory radio first. We are inside the 4Runner. There are plastic trim pieces that surround the HVAC knobs, the heating and air conditioning knobs. You're gonna pinch and pull those off or use your plastic pry tool. You gotta get a little aggressive on them, they will come off. That exposes 10mm nuts that you're gonna take out in order to release the climate control. So in the middle here, you can see pulling on the inside of the climate control. We'll take it off after you take those bolts out, and that's gonna allow us to reveal 4 additional bolts down low. So again, use your 10mm, take those out, and then you'll be prepared to take out the factory head unit. Now, once you do, take a picture behind the factory head unit. There are 4 wires that we want to pull from behind this system. The rest we need to take out just to get access to those wires. So take a quick picture, that way you can put it back together, and don't forget about your emergency flashers up top. All right, so here are the wires revealed, and the stock radio is in the trunk. I like to use a towel or something on the shifter knob to protect everything from getting marred up, because there's sharp, pieces of mounting equipment and sheet metal back there. All right, so here's ultimately what we're gonna have to do, guys. You see this little wire right here where it's skinned? What I did is I took a brand new razor blade and I cut around it. Now I'm gonna tell you there's 4 wires we have to do this to, and you wanna do it 2.5 inches or so down so you have room for repairs. But this is a super important part of how we draw the signal from the factory head unit. So what we're doing is we're taking the front left, the rear left, the front right, and the rear right speaker outputs that are going to our door speakers. And what we're gonna do is convert that into a boosted signal that goes to our amp. That's what that LC2I Pro does, that I've spent a ton of time researching, and this is the most proper way to install a head unit. I don't wanna talk too much about equipment. That's not my job in this video. I feel like my job is to give you the rundown of the step-by-step required to install a system. So I'm really gonna try to bite my tongue on that, but just know we are picking up 4 speaker wires that are gonna convert not to a standard line out converter, but to the LC2I Pro, which allows us to properly boost and dial in and harmonize that signal so that the JL amplifier gets a super clean and rich and powerful signal from our factory provided head unit with no RCAs. So this is essentially converting our speaker wires into RCAs. Enough about that. So what we're gonna do is a military splice with solder. So what I've done here is I've exposed the yellow. You're gonna need to do the yellow, the red, the black, and the solid white speaker lines. They tend to be a little larger than that other random wire that's in there. If you have any questions, pause this video, search the internet. There's very clear instructions on which ones to do. Those are the 4 that you need to military splice that spool of 16 gauge wire that you just bought off Amazon because you're watching this video, right? So you have yellow, you have red, you have white, you have black. Those are the 4 that are gonna lead out. And that military splice, guys, what you do is you open up that, right there where you saw that arrow, you open up that strand of wire using a toothpick or something, a small nail. You stick your new wire that has been stripped through and you thread one pigtail one way, say towards you, and the other pigtail forward to create a wire that even if you pulled super hard on it will not come undone. We're still gonna solder it, but those are gonna be your 4 leads going out that are gonna supply the LC2I, the proper signal from the factory radio, and tape them up really properly. And then I have the 4 lines feeding out. Now you're gonna need to find a way to run those 4 lines going down into your floor mat area, your carpet area, and join up with this power wire that we're gonna install next. So you can get creative with that. You can run like whatever you need to push those wires behind the dash and get to where you can go under the carpet, behind the carpet, and then get to this area, because we're gonna mount under the passenger seat. You need to do. It's really simple, just push them through. But ultimately, one other thing that I did with this line, just to show it one more time, is I put zip ties every 12 inches or so, 10 to 12 inches or so, and snip them off so that it would be easier to keep all those lines together and there would be no hard pulling on the wire. They pull all as one instead of one wire being pulled more than another or it getting caught up or snagged on something. I hope that makes sense. You probably already researched this. I just wanted to give you the only visual on YouTube that's this detailed. Try not to get into too much detail, but I hope you find this helpful. Leave me a quick comment if you do, if this is good stuff. Let's keep going. So next, I already had installed the 4 gauge power wire in the last video, but you're gonna need to take off your battery terminal cover for your positive there. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna follow this factory harness and go all the way over here where you can see this little grommet. Now, what I need you to do is take needle nose pliers like I have here, stick them in that grommet in the middle and pull on it. And we're gonna cut a hole in that, so don't worry about marring it up. It's fine. You can see me struggling while I'm filming to do it. But if you squeeze on it pretty good and pull on it pretty good, you'll be able to get it out. I keep extra of these grommets in the garage. I recommend that you buy a set if you do a lot of work like this. But we're gonna cut a hole in that grommet in the garage that's perfectly suited for our 4 gauge wire. I'm gonna let you do that on your own. Just use some pliers, snip it, and then use a razor blade to cut it until you can push your wire through. It's important to know before you run your wire through to push it through that grommet so you're not grommetless, and you'll learn the hard way if you end up doing that. But in the meantime, get a the longest screwdriver you have in the garage or a coat hanger, something, and poke a hole through that area where the grommet was. There's firewall insulation behind there that can be pretty difficult. You want to use the sharpest, longest, Phillips or flathead that you have, and poke a hole so that you can run that power wire through. I used a little bit of wax, like some quick wax that I used to clean the outside of vehicles up, to lube the wire up so it went through perfectly. And you can see that I reinstalled that grommet before I pushed it through and just ran it down the line so that I had some area to work until I needed to seal it up there. So I hope that makes sense. Pull your power wire through carefully, zip tie it up with the existing harness that we talked about a second ago, and your power wire has gone through the firewall and is not exterior to the car. That is my preference, just for safety and for waterproofing. So I'm struggling a little bit with what order I should put these in, but let me just say that I was able at my house to do a quick test install, and you can see me here listening to it for the first time. I ultimately hooked a ground up underneath the passenger seat after scuffing up a little bit of the stock paint that's on the passenger seat for a good connection. I ground it down. And I decided, after being able to get it to work properly, that I wanted to head over to my buddy Sean's at Quality Automotive in Hillsborough, North Carolina, to let him help me button up and finish this job up so I could properly film for you guys. instead of trying to do this one-handed. I go to Quality Automotive all the time. They're great people. Here they are. Check them out if you have any needs in Hillsboro, or if you own a 4Runner. He loves 4Runners there. He's willing to do lift kits, you know, brakes. I just got my spark plugs changed there, and we made a video if you want to DIY that. But I love working with Sean, and we pulled up there to finish the job. Just know I buttoned it up and tested it, and you're going to see some wires that we haven't talked about, but we will be talking through them, so don't let that scare you. So here's Sean, you know, after I gave him a rundown of what we were up to today. He is removing pretty much the hood latch clip on this side panel piece that's underneath the steering column. What we're gonna do is we're gonna incorporate the bass knob with that left kick panel piece that you're looking at to the left there, where your knee would hit in your 4Runner, right? So I looked at many different options, and based on the backing that's needed for the mounting hardware of that bass knob that was sent with my 750 HD kit, I decided not to go in the light bar area, like where your windshield heater defrost button is, you know, your de-icer button is. I decided actually to go on that panel itself. So what we're doing here is we're using our trim tool to remove the kick panel on the side there. We are taking apart the bottom of the steering column, and ultimately we're exposing this bottom piece that he's about to pull out now. And all you have to do is pull on this. I've taken it off before when I installed my remote start system. It's not bad at all. You just pull on it and it comes right out. Mine's been out probably 5 or 10 times, so it might be a little easier than you're seeing here. But there is an airbag down there that you need to be aware of. So even when you're running the wire, just be aware, you know, there's an airbag that you need to be very careful with. There's 2 clips that you'll see Sean remove pretty easily here by just squeezing on the top. But if you want to put your bass knob like I did in this video, this is a required step, and you may need to release the steering wheel adjustment lever in order to get that piece out. I'm not sure if Sean has to do that or not, but there it is coming out. There's the 2 wires, and I actually have more than 2 because I've got some aftermarket stuff going on back here. But here's what I'm talking about with this bass knob. So that main box unit is gonna be hidden behind the scenes. It's worth mentioning as well as there's some structural ridges that you can see that you need to account for as well. So the box needs to mount flush. So you probably saw in the back end there's just like structured ribs behind it. That was a part of the molding process. You see those raised areas. You just want to measure and make sure, you know, your dot is pretty close to exact, so that that back of that bass knob can go perpendicular, or, you know, upside down horizontally to fit in between those, so that your knob isn't halfway coming through. You know, you got to put that little nut on it. So Sean let me borrow his drill here, and I grabbed proper drill bits. I'm not gonna say that everybody in this video is using JL, so I'm not gonna mention this drill bit size that you need, but there you can see me drilling perfectly in between those ridges, knowing that it's gonna fit. And I did a step system here where I just, you know, started small and went up until that bass knob went through. And I'm showing you a size. Again, I'm not gonna say it out loud because your bass knob size may be different, and I don't want you drilling too large of a hole for the project that you're taking on. But there's mine, and as you can see, once I start pushing here, kind of hard to hold a camera. Sean was over working on the passenger seat. Once I start pushing, the bass knob does go through, and once I actually put the bass knob on the top and tighten down the little nut collar, you can't even see that drill hole at all. Nobody will ever know it's there, and it does look factory. So yeah, I'd say job well done. And now we have control of our bass, no matter the genre of music we're listening to. And in my opinion, it looks very close to factory. There it is, mounted perfectly in between those ribbed cages, as we mentioned before. I guess you could sand those down if you drilled incorrectly, but that is the proper way, in my opinion, to do it. And there's the drill bit that I ended up using. Hope you guys find that helpful. You could always just throw that thing in the back seat and pick it up off the ground, but we like to have things cleanly installed. You know, that looks good to me, right? All right, let's move on. Oh, by the way, when you're running that phone line that goes behind that to join all your other wires, so you're joining wires, you know, you got your 4 speaker wires now coming out. You've got your main power wire that you push through. Now you've got a speaker wire to add to the mix. Just run everything under the carpet. Be aware of airbags. Consult whoever you need to consult. Risk is on you. Do not run a wire in front of an airbag. Run it behind any kind of airbag sensors and look those up on your own. That's why I like using Sean, but if you're doing this in your garage, just something to be aware of. There's airbags everywhere in this car that may not have been, present in older cars when you did this 10 years ago and feel comfortable doing the job. Here you can see Sean taking out the passenger seat. So passenger seat, there's obviously going to be some wires that are connected underneath. Be sure, and I didn't mention this, but I know you guys are watching this video in full before you take the job on. Be sure to take the negative battery terminal, and the positive for that matter, that goes to the amp off of the car before you get started. So that's always a safety measure that we like to keep in mind. And Sean found my old headphones. Sweet. Threw those things away a long time ago. A lot of stuff underneath here, great time to vacuum out your vehicle, but there are bolts on the front mounting feet and the rear mounting feet of the seat, as well as those covers you saw him remove that you're gonna need to take off in order to access where I wanted to mount my amp. If you decide to run yours to the trunk, just keep running your wires around the right side there in the, I don't want to call it the firewall area, but underneath those kick panels that we removed, you should be able to run them through. I really like this location because it makes it easily serviceable, and it will fit both the LCI2 as well as my 750 HD amp really easily, and it'll save me on some wiring as well. So you can see where the ground is located on the right there as Sean puts on the JL sticker. That's where I took my wire brush and really scuffed it up so I had a perfect ground, and my ground wire is super short, which is great. We want that pretty short. So here's that airbag. Just as one last friendly reminder, do not run in front of that airbag. Make sure your sensor is running behind the airbag and don't pay attention to the random wires you see there. All you need is that phone line that goes outside of that base knob, and just run behind that airbag. So now you can see all the wiring that I did prior to going to Sean's, where I zip tied it and all that. My run was way too long, but I'm saving all of those scraps. And there's that phone line that ultimately gets ran behind the dash and joins in with that crowd to go over to the amp. So you can see where I ran down and out with all of my 4 speaker wires that are now joining the LC2i Pro as well as the 750 HD amp, and just get an idea of how that all looks and how I buttoned up the radio and completely forgot to put my hazard light switch plug back in. So quick note, if you are buying a prefabbed 4-gauge kit, it's probably gonna come with a lot of feet of RCAs. I should probably switch this out for a 1-foot run of RCAs because it's not going behind the head unit, but it works if you bundle it up and just shove it under the seat. So just a note on that. I have way too long of RCAs. I'm not sure how that would affect the quality of the sound. Maybe it does. You guys can tell me that in the comments. Now, the LC2i Pro has our 4 speaker wires. Just pay attention to the wiring diagram that I'm gonna show you here in a moment on how to plug those in. There are 4 inputs on the LC2i Pro that you will need to feed in order to get the proper signal. Now, the LC2i Pro will share, it's gonna share its power wire with the amp power, and we're gonna fuse that as well. And since the LC2i Pro can turn on based on having a signal from those speaker wires, we actually don't need a remote wire going to it at all, which is amazing because it can share the remote wire with the amp, and we don't need to have a, pretty much a power wire that turns on with the head unit. That is an incredible feature. So guys, back to the install here. You can see Sean soldering together the LC2i's small ground cable to the main ground cable. We did the same with the battery cables, as you will see. We also installed a 1 amp fuse from the battery cable that is shared between the JL amp to the LC2i Pro. What you see in front of you now are these little ferrules. They're sold as a kit on Amazon or at your local parts store. The ferrules make it to where your power wires and your ground wires are super clean and don't have any strands that may touch together. You can see us routing the speaker wire to go behind the rear seats and I leave a bunch of extra so I can move it around to any corner of the trunk area that I want. But ultimately what Sean did is he used a piece of speedometer wire that he had from an old motorcycle, and you can see him taping up, you know, that thick speedometer, flexible speedometer wire to be able to route it underneath the carpet and be in the back of the car. Okay, so now is our last chance to test everything. So we're gonna hook the negative as well as the positive back up to the battery, make sure that our 4-gauge kit is connected to the battery terminal, make sure that our ground is connected properly to the piece that we cleaned up on the floor. Here is industrial Velcro that I'm gonna be using on the bottom side of both units, the LC2i Pro and the JL750HD. That way it's serviceable. So once it's mounted and placed properly, we can just lift it up, unvelcro it, pull it out into the rear passenger floorboard area and make adjustments to the tune without needing to take the seat out. Whenever you're putting it back underneath after servicing it, just make sure that you get that floor air vent right above it. As you can see there, that'll prevent any overheating. Everything's looking good, guys. I don't think I recorded us placing the Velcro because we were doing it two-handed, but you get the point. Just use 2 strips on the amp, 1 strip on the LC2i Pro, and you're good to go. Tuck everything that you can under the carpet just for protection. These wires are well insulated, but we don't want anything getting pinched. Put your seat back in, and again, test before you do that, but put your seat back in carefully. Make sure that you reconnect any of the harnesses that you see there beside the new wires that we've added. And we are clean. We are in perfect shape to enjoy, you know, our new sound system. I really took pride in recording as much as I could and speaking to this as much as I could. I hope that I covered everything. I know that there were some basics that may have been missed, but if you guys are thinking of doing this yourself, surely you know where a power wire goes, where a ground wire goes, I like to think. So at this point, Sean's put the seat back in, reconnected everything, put the boot covers over the seat feet, and here is a final look at the 4Runner, dirty as it can be, but everything cleanly installed, and it's ready for a full detail. And there is the W7, no wire to be seen. I ended up taking the tag off, but I thought it was cool since it was brand new to leave that on for a second. Here's the amp under the seat. Even if you stuck your feet all the way under there, you would have trouble kicking it, but it has a protective plate so you would never damage anything. There is the JL box being burned. Thanks for watching BT Willis Garage, guys. Hope this helped you out. Take care and talk to you soon.